Welcome everyone to the Innovators Breakfast. Another month down. It goes so fast, which is worrying. But today's call, I wanted to talk about something called the anchoring effect, which I'm sure everyone has experienced to some degree. And the reason that this topic came to mind for me this month was because of a challenge I'm doing at the moment, supporting an old friend from university, Jennifer Stressen, who was on our podcast recently, who has set up this charity called the World Climate Relay, which aims to solve or give funds. And they've raised, I think, $114,000 on their first round. And they distribute those across the most effective climate charities in the world. And she's a big supporter of the effective altruism movement. And given what we can, she's taken the 10% of her salary pledge, and she's an awesome human being. So Alex and I stupidly signed up to this challenge at the back end of our podcast. I decided to do 1 kilometer's worth of pull-ups in 7 days, which for me and my arm length equates to 170 pull-ups a day. We're day 6 into the challenge right now, and it's breaking me. Alex decided to do 1 kilometer of push-ups. And then that got me thinking, like, 170 pull-ups a day is a huge extreme anchor. But actually, as I started doing it, made doing 100 seem easy, which on any other day before I'd come across the World Climate Relay and signed up to this challenge, 100 pull-ups a day would sound like a ridiculous amount. And it just got me thinking about, if you anchor yourself at such a high target, doing anything below that feels easier, but also then can also magnify what you do in any given day. And it got me thinking about this anchoring effect and how it impacts our lives in probably less obvious ways. And of course, there are positive anchors. I mean, anchor in itself is quite a negative term. You associate it with something that's holding you back, but maybe you could flip that in terms of a positive anchor that grounds you. I don't know. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there into this conversation and this group of great minds. We've got a new joiner today, Matthias from Walkabout. It comes to Walkabout Prague, and we've become friends and connect in multiple different ways and different projects, which is classic INSO and Walkabout combining forces. And yeah, we've got some repeat faces on here. So hey, I just wanted to start with the kind of the icebreaker that we normally do: pose a question and give an answer and hand over to someone else. I just want to what anchors exist in your lives right now? I've just displayed, the anchor that I'm experiencing right now, so I don't need to go again, but I'll hand over to Albert first.
Right. So I didn't have much time to think about it. But I think in terms of the anchor, like what's holding me the most in life right now would probably be my job, sadly. In terms of like you've said, setting like these challenges and maybe like giving the best out of yourself. I don't think if I have something like that. I should probably join the challenge too, right? But it's already too late.
No, it's not too late. You can sign up, but no, it's yeah. I mean, come back to it. If something pops into your head later on, who pick someone else then?
I will. Maybe Doug? Do you have something like that?
To give other people a chance to think, I can say a reflection on the subject rather than my own anchor. My brother does or used to do quite a lot of marathons and things like that, and he now cycles quite long distances, like from south of Scotland up to Skye and camps. And he was talking about if you're doing a gym exercise, he feels that the first third tends to be quite easy, and then it gets harder and harder. And I think that's possibly a bit of an anchoring effect. I remember once I was on the back of a punt, and we were going along, and I noticed there was a low bridge, and it was lower than I was, and the punt was drifting under the bridge. So I decided I would try and hang on to the bridge, and I hung on, and they managed to turn the punt round and came up, and it just pushed me a bit, and I fell into the water. But I felt it was partly that if you're aiming to hang on for a certain amount of time, when you're reaching that time, you're almost imagining the relief of letting go and being able to let go. And that makes it harder. For the final tiny bit is where people can just collapse.
Yeah, that's nice. I actually forgot about the sports thing because I was going too deep in my mind. So the thing for me is probably running, because last weekend we went for a run with my girlfriend, and we were like, we don't really know how long the run will be. right? It depends on how we feel the first few kilometers. But we were going like back and forth. And I said, let's run 10.5 kilometers so that if we come back, we can basically do a half marathon, right? At the end, we felt tired and we did only 14. But I think if we hadn't set up that 10.5 kilometer mark, we wouldn't be able to run even like 10 or something because it was too hot and we were really tired. But having that goal of being able to run half marathon just for the sake of running a half marathon on a normal Sunday makes you run a bit more than you would normally run. Yeah. So maybe that's for me.
So who's next, Doug? So
Well, let's go for Cameron.
Mine's a very easy answer. I'm a single dad and I've got 2 young children. So they are my anchor. The only reason I do anything is for them. So it's actually really easy for me to answer this question.
nice. Who's next?
Matthias?
Okay. I first didn't understand if anchor is like a positive thing or a negative thing. So now I think it's positive based on the previous answer. But for me, my anchor would be probably my ambition. Like even though it's kind of spiritual, but like it's like kind of metaphysics. Yeah, it's like it's stable in my life in many years. It keeps me going no matter what. So yeah.
I guess Alex would be the last. Round it off.
Kind of half between Dan and Albert in terms of the anchoring philosophy, which is really weird. So I was chatting to Dan this morning and I was in the gym doing like leg press or leg extensions. And basically you have this pin that you can like use to choose the weight. And that goes up and down in increments of 5. And then on top of that, there's like 3 kgs that you can slide to like get the granularity of the weight. So I was doing the weight and I was like, okay, great. Last set, I'm going to add 3 kgs to it, right? And psychologically, you're like, okay, this is going to be hard because obviously you've gone, like the normal set was already hard and now you're adding more weight to it. Anyway, so I slide it across, I do the sets and I'm feeling it. I'm like, geez, this feels harder than the other sets. Now, obviously, granted, you are more tired because it is the last set. But that said, about halfway through, I noticed that I actually had been working with 3 kgs on the whole time and I slid it off. So it's like this really weird thing where like when you set a number or a goal and you think it's going to be hard, your body naturally makes it hard. And to Albert's point, right? Like if you aim for a half marathon, 14 Ks seems really easy. But if you aim for 14 Ks, then it's brutal. And the thing is like, even if you aim for 5 Ks, your body is naturally going to be like at the 2.5K mark, trying to get you to like pause and like, is it really worth it? So really interesting effect. I don't quite know what's going on there, right? Because obviously you want to do the hard work and you want to put the reps in so you can get faster and fitter and stronger. So yeah, lots to unpack there. Dan, I'll hand over.
It's like on that example of like you completely like placeboing yourself there. That's like a brilliant example of, and that's I guess like if a coach were to do something like that sneakily, the coach could get more out of you without you realizing, right? And that this is a mixture of physical and mental development and ability and strength. Now, in that moment, when you realize that you've done it to yourself, is there like a burst of energy or frustration in the fact that actually, okay, you're going to reset, you're going to double check the weight, and actually the last set is this time exactly as you want it to be? In that moment of kind of like almost like frustration, anger, humor, could you have done another set? Like, would that energy have pushed you to where you wanted to be originally?
I suppose, like, yes, but at the same time, it's like you're a little bit annoyed at yourself because you thought that you're like putting in the graft and going further, but in reality, you're just 3 Ks lighter.
Yeah, but the good thing is you had the 3K on for the majority of the workout. So you were actually working, like you got the benefit of the extra weight for the majority of the thing. Anyway, rambling on here. Hey, that's awesome. There's some great stories there. I don't know, like at some point as one of you was talking, I had a flashback to this memory of, I don't know if you do this in the Czech Republic, Albert or Matthias, but when I was in primary school, we did a cycling proficiency test, which was like, it allowed you to ride your bike on the streets where someone would come into school and you'd do bike, you'd learn to indicate on your bike and stop and start and all that sort of stuff. And I distinctly remember this memory of like almost being like cheated or hacked, but I was happy for it in the sense that they'd built up this cycling week with this cycling proficiency test at the end. And as a young kid in school, it was one of the first times we were tested. It was like the equivalent of a driving test, but for a child. And I remember them doing this mock test with us, and everyone did the mock test, and they were like, "Congratulations, you've all just passed your cycling proficiency." And we were like, "What? But the test is still to go." And they were like, "No, that was the test. We called it a mock test to take the pressure off." And it was an amazing effect. It was one of these moments in my life where I was like, that was a really sneaky tactic, but I'm glad it worked, because I don't know if we'd failed the mock test, what would have happened if there was time in the schedule for the real test. But again, that was a kind of anchoring effect that was, I don't know, like a manipulation of the human mind in order to get more out of us. Now, obviously, these conversations, we try and have these conversations and link them to real world effect. And so, I mean, a few of the things that I've looked up where anchoring affects us in our daily lives can be things like negotiations, and maybe life is not as extreme as kind of like hostage negotiations that maybe people jump to when people say that word. It could be even something as simple as negotiating which restaurant to go to or where to go on holiday with your partner. Or life is a bit of a negotiation and a balance between what you want versus what someone else wants, and compromise comes into this. But one of the negotiation tactics that came out of a book called Never Split the Difference by former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss in the US was this principle called extreme anchoring. And Donald Trump does it all the time. It's the tariffs. It's, I'm going to put on 1,000,000% tariffs on anyone who doesn't agree with me. And actually then if you settle on, 100% tariff, that feels like a victory for the person on the other end. But it's actually ultimately what probably Donald Trump wanted. I'm not sure if he's playing that level of strategy, but I assume his advisors are supporting his extreme anchoring philosophy. And of course, you can only use that card so many times before people start seeing that extreme anchoring effect. But extreme anchors can also come into lives when we're talking about pricing negotiation. I drop in an extreme value, or this is what I want, knowing that actually I'm going to land somewhere below that. And actually, weirdly, Chris Voss's book says never split the difference, which he says never go halfway, because then kind of both sides lose. But yeah, just kind of taking the anchoring effect and putting it to those two things, which we all experience kind of daily, probably more the negotiation side, but also when it starts to come into things like pricing, proposals, agreements, winning business, convincing people like, Matthias, to join your platform. Do you ever have to use some sort of anchoring effect to convince people to sign up? I just want to throw it out there. When it's framed like that, does anyone have an experience of this?
Okay, what does anchoring effect mean? Like, I'm not English native and I still don't know.
So the anchoring effect is it's linked to a human tendency to get anchored to the first piece of information that we come across. So for example, if someone says the price of this car is £1,000,000, automatically our brains are anchored on that being £1,000,000. Now, actually, even if the value of that car is £100,000, because someone told us it's worth £1,000,000, 100,000 all of a sudden seems cheap. It seems like a good deal. And so people can use this effect to, a good negotiator will put in an extreme anchor, knowing that you're actually going to come. So if they're trying to sell the car for £110,000 and it's only worth 100, they could anchor you at saying, convince you that it's worth £1,000,000. And actually, when you eventually pay £110,000 for this car, they're happy because they've just sold a car worth 110 for 100, because the fact that they anchored you right at the start on an extreme anchor.
There are other examples where you ask people questions, but you can start off with somebody's social security number, and that will affect people's replies when they're asked how much they think a house is worth. And that's been repeated time and time. It's got nothing to do with housing. It's not, it's just in a totally different realm. But if you've seen a big number, it makes your estimate of things go up.
Yeah.
And that's just the way the brain works.
Yeah.
It's also used frequently, say, in shops. It's not quite the same effect, but for, say, bottles of wine. There's some bottles there that are very expensive. They're not there to sell. They're there to make you get the next one down and feel, oh, I've saved such and such. And again, some of the cheapest ones are there so that you don't want to buy the cheapest bottle of wine for your girlfriend, night out with a girlfriend. So you go up from that.
Yeah.
You see that all the time with the kind of
But it does adjust the way you think about numbers.
phone product lines and stuff like that. So you'll have like the cheap one and then the middle one and the one up from that and then the extremely expensive one. And you can kind of value anchor the relative price of that to get the person to go to whichever one you want specifically. There's another form of anchoring in kind of sales where they get you to say yes as many times as possible so that you've kind of anchored your frame of reference to like okay or yes before the pitch even happens. So there's loads of ways and applications in which you can actually utilize it. But Albert, you had a point.
Yeah, I just told about my realm, right? The space realm. Actually, you're used to on Earth driving distances like, I don't know, 100 kilometers. Maybe some of you commute to work 100 kilometers. When you like see that you have to drive 1000 kilometers, it's quite a way, right? You're going overnight or the whole day. And then you get into space and going to moon 300,000 kilometers to the moon. And then someone starts to talk about light years suddenly. And yeah, I think it's quite a good point about the imagination that a person can have about the numbers. Because even with money, you stop imagining the amount of money after you go over, I don't know, million pounds or something. Then the numbers really, you don't grasp how big of a number it is. So that might be something to also put here as a thought.
That's a good point. Like, I guess also sticking to the space theme then with Cameron and the awesome stuff that you're building and working on, how much of that almost like convincing humans to think about things on the scale when we're talking in space and, you know, we're talking about space debris and the scale of that problem. How much of anchoring is linked to humans' ability to understand scales and appreciate things?
Initially in the space industry, the first impression everybody gets is it's too complex. So you get this, no matter what you say, everybody immediately goes straight to building in space. That's difficult. So that's their anchor, not mine. That it's hard. It's either going to be too expensive, it's going to be too tricky, there's going to be too much involved in doing it. So all the questions you get, all the business discussions we have, any investment conversations, it's all centered around, can you actually do this? And you spend a lot of time just trying to justify that one concept point. Everything in space, because everybody knows that it's expensive. Anyone going into the space industry, they have a preconceived anchor of pricey. It's going to cost a lot of money. And then you've got these secondary anchors as you go through the process of it's difficult and it's time consuming. It's the regulatory frameworks. So even when you're designing, developing, progressing, these factors are always on your mind. What I'm building, I believe it can be done. My engineers believe it can be done. But until I show people, I can't lift that anchor of this. That preconceived notion that it's too hard is going to remain until I show.
That's maybe
Yeah,
a
sometimes
similar
you're going
thing.
to show.
I once went to buy a watch, and I also bought 2 computer magazines, and I spent ages trying to decide which watch to get, looking at all the different things it could do. And it was a simple watch, not one of these things that monitors your blood pressure and so on. And then I realized the watch actually costs less than the 2 magazines. But we get, from past experience, you think watches are expensive. But now you can get watches that are much more accurate than Rolexes used to be.
The watch over 15 grand, maybe not.
But nobody buys a Rolex to tell the time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it segues onto a kind of an analogy that comes to mind when Cameron was talking, which I think really it's about how do we convince people, or how do we manually reset people's anchors so that actually they can understand what we're trying to get across to them, knowing that we've actually almost raised that ceiling or removed that anchor, however you want to frame it. And one of the things which fits perfectly to what Doug says is that the classic example of, if you're trying to sell luxury watches, one of the best places you can do that is to do it at a luxury car show, because in comparison to the prices of the luxury car, which are the focus of that event, the watch seems cheap. But likewise, if you want to sell luxury cars, sell them at a yacht show, because again, the yachts are expensive in comparison to the cars. And if you want to sell yachts at airplane shows, private jet shows. And actually, when you get to that level of private jet shows, you should probably be giving the watches away for free, as if they're like some sort of goodie bag that you'd get at a conference. And again, all of that is just human psychology and anchoring played out at a very visual. Like, you can imagine that. I saw a fantastic article, an advert in the Czech Republic on. I don't know what that means for you, Cameron. I don't know where you sell spacecraft at a lunar landing show, I guess. But anyway, I saw a fantastic on Land Rover the other day. They did a really nice Land Rover Defender, I think the latest model, pulling up to this like private harbor where there's obviously a maybe $1 billion yacht in the background, and it's like you're driving up to your yacht in this car, and it captured what I just described there in a very clean, elegant, no words. It was all visual. It was perfect. But
relative.
Exactly, it's relative, right? So how do we get people's anchors, or how do we? I don't know. Let's assume we're all greasy salesmen here trying to sell something. How can we actually understand that anchor, where our target buyer is? How do we understand where their anchor is, and what tactics can we use to get them to where?
I think that's the problem with an anchor. You can't be a greasy salesman, because by that approach, you're trying to con them. Your initial approach is thinking that you can trick them or somehow lead them away from their current position, which might be the right place to be. Rather than trying to sell them something, you need to justify. We live in a world where everything is now based on proof and evidence. So somehow you need to show someone something that will, well, obviously change their perspective, but you need to do the thing. Like Elon. Right now, Elon's a massive hype merchant. He plays a lot on hype, and he's pushing the data center thing right now. Now, he could put that much compute in space. What he's not telling everybody is that within a few months, that'll burn up in the atmosphere, because his satellites don't last very long in orbit. I don't think misleading people is the way to do it, because eventually Elon's going to be in a position where people start seeing all the satellites come out of the sky and realize he can't do what he said he was doing. Whereas if he put a data center up there, like with the rocket that he's building, with the Starship, yes, a few of them blow up, but you can see the progress. You can see each Starship is going further. It's making more and more progress. You can see he's actually getting there. So that's a little different for perspective. They watch it happen. Whereas selling, when you mislead someone, you are setting a trap for yourself later on.
But is it misleading? Let's strip out the kind of maybe the hype element of it a little bit. So let's assume that you're selling Rolexes. It's the same product. It is a Rolex, whether you're putting that in a car, trying to sell that in a car boots store or show for, I don't know, the Czechs have it where you go to a field, everyone comes, opens up their car boots and sells their secondhand old stuff. It's just like, I'm trying to think like the cheapest marketplace equivalent.
Boot sale is a fairly good example.
Yeah. So if you're trying to sell Rolexes in a car boots sale, you're probably going to struggle versus selling the same product. So there's no hype element. That you've just got the same stand, the same person behind it, the same products on the table. I mean, that's just a good strategic sales move, right? To put it in, to have your watch stall in a yacht show versus a car boot sale. Like, that's just, to my mind, not greasy salesman tactic. It's a positive sales tactic. It's a strategy.
That would be a strategy. What you suggested before was a greasy salesman tactic of talking to them. When showing someone something and telling someone something, they're different things. Especially given that I work in the space industry, there's a lot of people telling you one thing and not being able to deliver.
But I guess the messaging, even in my example, the messaging would change, right? Like the person behind the stall trying to sell it would pivot the message to the audience in front of them, right? So
you see, unfortunately, with that example, Rolexes have a certificate. So you could sell your Rolex, you could show that, yes, this is a Rolex, this is real. You're in the wrong place there because you don't have the right market. So when you put your luxury car in the luxury yacht next to the luxury yacht, you're in a market where people have available cash.
Yeah,
Whereas, a car boot sale, you don't want to sell expensive things because it's for people who
They-
don't have lots
They've got
of money.
available cash. It's just all rolled up in their pocket. So it's the pocket sizes that are the limiting factor there. Hey,
Right.
what other anchors?
Can we make a specific example? How do you sell this?
Oh, we got Doug reaching down
Well,
to
you
his
might
side.
see-
You got in his pocket.
Wear a heliport on your head, wear a drone on top of it, and
love this
redirect the
office.
thrust upwards, and that'll divert the rain away. The problem I have in selling this concept is that it maybe costs about £2,000 compared with £8. So how do I get over this psychological block that people have got, that they rate brollies as worth about a tenner, when in reality they could have something much better for just
You go on the inconvenience. With an umbrella, you have to spend the time holding it in your hand. Your arm begins to ache. After a while, with the heavy rain, you just want to put your brolly down, and you get caught in the wind. Your brolly goes backwards. It gets caught. The brollies are useless. You don't need brollies anymore. The rain and the weather is too bad for brollies. They don't make them to spec like they used to. You need this brand new state-of-the-art hands-free umbrella.
Right. Would you like to be a salesman for Brolly Tech?
I love
Mhm.
this.
But isn't it like about comparisons? Like you have to compare it with something that the person knows. But actually the catch is to know what to compare it to so that the person actually understands it and accepts it as the viable comparison with the product that you want to sell or show or anything, basically.
You could also have an added benefit of, if you have it braced around the neck, it eases the weight of your head. So you no longer have to carry the heavy weight of your head around. Your neck doesn't ache anymore.
Better posture.
You get the stretching, so extra
Yeah.
blood flow.
You could
All the
even
healthy.
String, and that's because you were
Mm.
hanging. So yeah.
Hey, Matthias, I wonder, so just talking about meeting people where they're at then, and kind of, you've built a platform that connects investors with people who need investment, so typically startups. What sort of psychological anchors did you face building this platform? Like, because again, I assume here that it's the traditional method is quite high touch. It's a lot of sending pitch decks to people. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of human convincing. It's, do I trust in the
Actually,
plan?
that's the thing. It's not hard. Like when I talk to startups, I get startups. I would say that I didn't get some startups, but I would say I would get 85% of them. And when it comes to VCs, the VCs actually like being analyzed. It's like horoscope for them. And the pitch takes 1 minute, and then they want to see their analysis. But then again, it was always warm pitches. It was never cold pitches. So yeah.
It wasn't much of a because you just made it easier. It's not like people are, because I guess there's still no one's well, maybe it's an assumption that are people going to commit to investing on a match made by your system, or is there still a human element that's always required prior to that deal
Here's the
being
thing,
closed?
okay? I am not convinced that the matching will work actually. Like the idea wasn't really that we will be making the matches for the people. It was more like that we tell you where you go and then you do it yourself. And we can of course help you recruit VCs, and I think that it's gonna work out pretty nicely because when we have I think that's gonna be good. But generally speaking, I don't believe that it can work without a human connection in VC world. I don't believe that. Like it's extremely about the people on an extreme level. But then again, we know which people are where, so maybe creating like a networking map would help that. But yeah, I don't believe that it can be done without the people at this stage. Maybe in the future, but yeah.
And as we draw to a close on this, because I just wanted to almost take it back to the start and think about the anchors that we might have in our lives. Thinking back to my anchor right now of doing 170 pull-ups a day. I can't wait for that not to be a thing that I need to do anymore. But it's got me thinking about how that's going to change my perspective about what I can do afterwards physically, but also, what other things could I set? What other extreme anchors could I set in my life and my own goals, whether that's a business goal, a personal goal, a family goal, that might actually, if I were to do something as intense as kind of endure that anchor or aim for that anchor for 7 days, will that start to then change my behavior and my possibility afterwards. And even then, we could even go into the anchors that are forced upon us as kids that limit our ability to fulfill our potential later on in life. That's, I guess, a whole different thread, like what anchors are forced upon us in childhood by our parents and by the systems that we grow up in. But for me, I'm hoping that once this challenge is done, actually, to Cameron's point pre-call, he does 30 pull-ups a day. Well, that'd be awesome. Like, I'd love it if I could consistently do that and not consider that even just a thing. It was just easy. Maybe I could try and see how long I could do 50 pull-ups a day for, and not every day, because obviously I need to rest and stuff like that. But that would have seemed really difficult to me before, but actually it feels easy now. Like, me actually turning that into positive action and change and a pattern in my life is another thing. But yeah, I like the fact that this extreme anchor has almost like reset me in a way that I can think of a different possibility, and my ceiling, I feel, has raised, irrespective of whether I do it or not. What things in everyone's lives could they maybe experiment this on, and what would you want if you could choose one thing that you could kind of do more of by setting an extreme anchor in your own lives? What would it be? Alex, you want to go first?
Counterpoint that it's less about the anchor and more about the system that makes sure that you actually adhere to the anchor, because it's easy to set goals or whatever it may be. It's another thing to stay consistent and actually be driven to perform for that. So yeah, I think it's more about, instead of saying, okay, I'm running 20 or 40 Ks today and then feeling absolutely daunted by it, to like making sure, how do I get my running shoes on every day? So in a kind of James Clear atomic habits sense is what I prioritize. But I think personally, at least, it's, how can I set an anchor that means that every single day is productive at baseline? So like, what is the smallest set of things that you can execute that's like, okay, this is a start to an acceptable day? So that could be gymming every morning, or going for a run, or having your morning coffee outside, or going for a walk, that kind of thing. I don't know if I just completely derailed the line of thought there, but
and feel free if anyone wants to jump on what anchors they may have had forced upon them as they've grown up and lived. That would be interesting to unpick as well. But yeah,
can I add one more thought? Sorry. Which is, again, going back to Therese's Roth framework. And I think this is the absolute biggest anchor, and I will sound like a broken record until I die on this point. But it's like, your own perception of the world and how you act is your biggest anchor, because all the feedback that you get in life is, in one way or another, directly correlated with how you initiated that experience, right? Like, if you don't like someone and you start the conversation off sounding like you don't like them, you can't now go and say like that their reaction is, see, this is the reason why I don't like them. Like, no, obviously not. So I think from an introspective point of view, your actions, your behaviors, your patterns, your mindset is your biggest anchor in every single kind of domain of life. So actually, that's my answer.
Okay, I love it.
I went to an event about allyship, where you help somebody that's, say, junior in your industry, maybe from a disadvantaged background. And one of the people at it said he ended up getting paired up with somebody who he had always disliked in the past. And they decided to discuss it rather than treat it like the elephant in the room and not discuss it. And he said that very soon they found out that they really did like each other, but they'd somehow got off on the wrong foot. And thereafter, each time they do something, you see it in a negative light. It's confirmation bias. You see them as being standoffish and not welcoming. And well, you've just put a non-welcoming face towards them because you don't like them. So what do you expect? And it said it totally changed. So there may be some people that we just don't get on with, and we've somehow got off on the wrong foot, and should maybe reconsider. Maybe they got out of bed on the wrong side, or maybe you got out of the bed on the wrong side.
Chances are you're talking to me.
We can stop talking about them now.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
No, I'm usually the one that's woken up on the bad side of the bed.
Yeah, well, hey, guys, fascinating conversation as always. I don't know whether I'm to Alex's point, like, it's about the system. For me, it's like having like what I've experienced on this extreme anchor this week has been good, but is it going to fundamentally change the system that allows me to change my behavior consistently over time? To be seen. Like, is there value in at least acknowledging the fact that extreme anchors can allow us to achieve more or reach our potential, however we want to fulfill that? And I think there's even just value in just reflecting on what anchors, to Doug's point, that might influence your life right now without you even realizing. And if it was an anchor that you could break through by having a simple conversation with someone and just calling it out there and saying, hey, look, I feel this. Do you feel this? Like, what is it? What caused this relationship to break down? Like, oh, actually, yeah, within a very short period of time, that might unlock and reset the baseline. And maybe in a month or two, you might end up hating each other again, which just confirms that original anchor was correct. But I think it's worth exploring. I think it's worth reflecting on. I think it's worth thinking about. Anyway, thank you for this. Shameless plug on my side. If you could find a moment today to donate to Alex and I's cause with this World Climate Relay, we'd be hugely appreciative. I think I've put the link in the chat. No pressure at all. But
I'm trying to get investment for my company and I don't have any available cash.
I'll just put it in there again. But I'm personally looking for £1 per pull-up. So obviously I'll be reaching out to my finance network after this to do it. But thank you all. Hope you enjoyed the conversation and see you in a month. But hey, pleasure to speak to you all. And
you could carry around a load of drones, and when they're needed, just drop them down. When it's rainy somewhere, you just drop down a whole load of them.
Yep, pretty much already. I've already designed the orbital aircraft carrier. I just need them to buy it. That's all.
Yeah, but I'm giving you a use case, which is to drop brolly drones down where they're needed.
I love it. All right, guys. See you later.
Cool.
Button.